Hello and welcome back to 5 Minutes with KeRusso. We've been walking through the teachings of Jesus, how to be a disciple of his. How does a disciple think? How does a disciple live? What does a disciple value? And I hope as you're listening to this, you're thinking, I want to be a part of this. This is huge to be able to help shape a world by living this way. And you can do that. And you may not be able to shape the whole world, but you can shape your part of it by living like Jesus calls you to live. Be a follower of his. Now, we're looking in Matthew at the 5 different places where Jesus speaks specifically to his disciples about such things. Matthew 5 through 7, Matthew 10, Matthew 13, Matthew 18, Matthew 24 through 25. And we're getting into Matthew 24 and 25 now. Now, a lot of people look at Matthew 24 and 25 and they're having a hard time seeing the relevance of it, sometimes even understanding it. But what I want to share with you is, it is readily understandable. It's not that hard to understand if you have the right information and the right tools. And it's also extremely relevant and important. And it can be one of your favorite places in the Bible if you want to spend time here. So I want to share some things with you. Others will come along and help me share some things with you. But let me just start off by telling you there's a movement that takes place in this teaching. Not that the other teachings don't have movement, but you need to understand the movement of this teaching in order to grasp what Jesus is doing. It starts off in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 1, where the disciples of Jesus, these 12 guys, they come up to him they're at the temple in Jerusalem, and they call his attention to the temple because for Jews, this was like the greatest wonder of the world. This was like the most magnificent structure, building complex of any place in the world. And if you were a good Jew, you just had a heart for going to the temple. You wanted to see the temple at some time in your life. It was just a magnificent building, from what I understand, and looking at maps of it and hearing people talk about it. It was. And Jews were very proud of it. And they want Jesus to share in that. And they come to him to point his attention to it so that he'll join in with them in their lavish praise of the Temple Mount. But Jesus doesn't do that. Instead, what he does is he says, all this stuff is going to crumble. It's going to be destroyed. It's all going to just, be one stone is going to be, not a stone is going to be left on top of it. It's just going to be wiped out. Well, I guess the disciples' attention, how can God let this happen to his temple? Well, ultimately, the temple is not what's really important to God. It was a place for worship. It was a place where he could be in the midst of people. But ultimately, a building isn't what's important to God. Well, what is? Well, as you listen to Jesus teach, where he takes those disciples, by the time he gets to the end of Matthew 25, the end of his teaching, he has this little story about sheep and goats and about people helping the least among them, feeding them and giving them something to drink, clothing them and welcoming them and taking care of them. That's what's important to God. That's what's in his heart, is people, especially the people that are vulnerable and oppressed, the people that are left out, the people that are overlooked, the people that are discounted. Jesus says, what God cares about is not what you do with buildings, but what you do with those people. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, have a heart for those people. And you think about that. That's huge. That's just like upside down thinking in the world of Jesus, and it's upside down thinking in our world. Today, you think about it, look at the huge church buildings that you'll see and how much money goes to those church buildings. And I get that buildings are important and that they serve in certain ways to, they're very functional and they can be used for ministry and for helping people. And I totally get that. But sometimes people lose focus and it becomes too much about buildings. And they forget the people. The kingdom of Jesus, the reign of Jesus, calls us to remember what's important to God, what's important to his Son, what's important to the Spirit of God. And it's always going to be people, always. And there are enough people who are looking out for themselves and have the power and status to do that to some degree. But there's a way huge amount of people who nobody looks after, nobody cares about. Well, in the kingdom, God cares about them, and He wants His people to, and Jesus wants His followers to care about those people as well. That's what's important, and that's the movement that's taking place, the overall movement in this teaching. So we'll get into more details as we go along. Thank you for checking in. Leave comments. Send an email at booksbykerusso@gmail.com. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time.